Austin Mercer took the official leather wallet with the tips of 2 fingers. He didn't open it right away. He flipped it over to the back first. Then he tilted it into the sunlight, like a man checking a cheap gas station purchase. The phone on the passenger seat caught his eye before the name on the ID. The business suit caught his eye after that. A lawful traffic stop was about to take its first wrong step. 9:47 in the morning. Julian Parker was driving his black SUV down Interstate 85, heading toward his office in Atlanta. A pair of thin file folders sat on the passenger seat. A cold cup of coffee was in the center console. His phone buzzed in its cradle. It was Megan Hayes from the office. Julian hit accept. He kept his eyes on his lane. Megan's voice got right to the point. A vehicle of interest in a child abduction case had just popped up on a traffic cam near the state line. The team at the office had a vehicle description, a partial plate, and a direction of travel. They needed the go-ahead to coordinate a stop with other agencies. Julian asked for 3 things: vehicle color, direction of travel, how solid was the data. Megan's answer was brief. The intel was solid enough to act. Julian glanced at the clock on his dashboard. The office was less than 10 minutes away. He said, "Green-light it. I'll be there in a few." Megan switched to the afternoon meeting schedule with the locals. Julian confirmed the time. Just then, red and blue lights flashed in his rear-view mirror. He looked up. The patrol car was right on his tail. Julian ended the call. He put on his right turn signal. He pulled the SUV over to the shoulder. Clean and straight. The tires stopped right on the white line. He pulled the parking brake. He opened the center console. He took out his driver's license and his official leather wallet. Back in the patrol car, Austin Mercer sat for a few extra seconds. He'd only been on solo patrol for 73 days. The morning shift had barely started. The computer screen in his car showed a cell phone violation, an easy ticket to write at the end of a shift. He looked at the black SUV ahead of him. He took in the vehicle first, then the phone sitting in its cradle. The government plate was right there on the back. His eyes scanned over it, then moved on. His right hand adjusted the camera on his chest. His left hand touched the ticket book sitting on the passenger seat. He opened his car door, stepped out. The wind from the fast lane pressed his pant leg tight against his leg. Julian lowered the driver's side window. He kept both hands high enough to be seen clearly. The official leather wallet sat in the palm of his right hand. Austin stood just clear of the doorframe. He didn't ask who the man had been talking to. Didn't ask where he was going. His eyes went to the phone first, then to the sleeve of the suit jacket, to the face of the watch on his left wrist, and only then did they land on the leather wallet. He said, "License. Registration." Julian handed over his driver's license along with the official wallet. The registration was still in the center compartment. He said, "I have official credentials. My office is nearby." Austin took both items with one hand. His thumb ran along the edge of the leather wallet. The badge was tilted into the sunlight. The official ID was flipped over to the back before he even looked at the front. Julian sat still in the driver's seat. The seatbelt was still fastened across his chest. Other cars continued to flow past in the left lane. The office was just over 2 miles away now. Austin still hadn't looked closely at the name on the ID. He looked at the picture first, then looked over the suit Julian was wearing one more time. The expensive car. The black man over 50. The clean business suit. The phone he'd just put down. He looked at all those things before he looked at the words on the credentials. Julian kept his voice low and short. He said, "I was just on an emergency call." Austin didn't respond to that. He just kept holding the badge in his hand. He didn't call the office. He didn't ask for a number to verify. He didn't ask for a name. The wind gently fluttered the edge of the ID in his hand. Julian glanced at the clock on the dashboard again. Megan was waiting for him to call her back. The off-site team was waiting on the next step. Austin stood there with the real badge in his hand, the real government ID in his hand, the roadside authority in his hand. 2. Austin Mercer still held the badge. He flipped the government ID over one more time. The face of it caught the sun. The edge of the old leather wallet bent a little between his 2 fingers. Julian Parker was still in the driver's seat. Seatbelt was still on. A line of cars rushed by on the left. The wind from the far lane whipped at the edge of the door. Julian said, "Call my office. It'll take less than a minute." Austin didn't put the badge away. He didn't hand it back either. His eyes went from the photo on the ID to the business suit, then to the black car, then back to the badge. He said, "A lot of people use things like this." Julian placed his left hand on the steering wheel. His right hand stayed open, not touching anything else. He stated the name of his office, stated the address, stated that it was just over 2 miles away, stated that the person at the desk would confirm immediately. Austin didn't write the number down, didn't ask for a name to talk to, didn't go back to his patrol car to make the call. He asked for the driver's license number. Julian said the number was on the driver's license he'd just handed him. Austin looked at the driver's license, then looked at the badge again. Julian said, "You can make the call right now." A truck passed. The wash from its tires pulled at the hem of Julian's suit jacket. Austin took a half step back. The hand with the badge dropped to his belt line. His other hand rested near the strap on his hip. He said, "Step out of the vehicle." Julian didn't open the door right away. He looked straight ahead through the windshield. Then he turned back toward Austin. He asked what he was being detained for. Austin didn't answer the question directly. He repeated his demand to step out of the car. Julian unbuckled his seatbelt, opened the door slowly, stepped out onto the shoulder. His leather shoes landed just inside the white paint. He kept both his hands where they could be seen. Austin stayed an arm's length away. The badge and ID were still in his hand. Julian stood by the driver's side door. The wind pushed the flap of his vest to one side. He said his name one more time. Said his title one more time. Said he'd just gotten off an urgent call from his office. Then he repeated his request to call for verification. Austin gave a short shake of his head. He said, "Your story is too perfect." Julian turned to look at the traffic, then looked back at the clock on the dashboard through the window. The minute hand had moved. He pulled his phone from his inside jacket pocket. Austin raised his voice, telling him to put the phone down. Julian didn't dial a random number. He called Ryan Brooks. The name was clear on the screen. The call connected almost instantly. Julian gave his location, gave the name Austin Mercer, said he was being held on the shoulder near the Brookhaven exit, told Ryan to come verify it himself before this went any further. Austin took a step forward. His hand opened, then stopped in midair. He said, "End the call. Now." Julian tilted his head to hear the other end of the line. He repeated the mile marker, repeated that he was southbound, repeated the officer's name. Everything was short. Everything was clear. Austin completely shifted his stance. He moved to a position just behind Julian's right shoulder. His hand touched his cuffs. The real badge hadn't been returned. The real ID hadn't been verified. Julian lowered the phone. He said, "You're skipping the easiest step." Austin grabbed his right wrist, turned Julian toward the body of the car. The phone slipped from his hand, fell onto the asphalt shoulder. The screen was still lit. On the other end of the line, you could still hear the wind. Julian didn't pull his hand back. He just said the name of his firm one more time. Said to call there. Austin pulled his hands behind his back, clicked the cuffs shut. A silver sedan slowed down up ahead. The woman inside looked in her mirror. Then she pulled over to the shoulder a few dozen yards away. It was Olivia Carter. She took out her phone. The lens pointed back toward the patrol car. Austin picked up Julian's phone, turned off the screen, tossed it onto the front seat of the patrol car, then opened the back door, shoved Julian onto the plastic bench seat. The clock on the patrol car's dash was clear in front of him. His office was still just a phone call away. Ryan Brooks was on his way. Olivia Carter was recording from a distance. Austin's body cam was still running. Every piece of verification was right there at the scene. Austin still hadn't made a single call. The back door of the patrol car was still open. Julian Parker sat on the plastic bench seat, his hands still cuffed behind his back. His phone was on the front seat. The screen was dark. The clock on the dash ticked forward another minute. Austin Mercer stood by the open back door. The leather service wallet was still in his hand. The credentials hadn't been returned. Olivia Carter stood a short distance away. Her phone stayed pointed in the same direction. At the office, Megan Hayes had pieced together enough from the disconnected call. She called Ryan Brooks directly. The officer's name was clear. The location near the Brookhaven exit was clear. Ryan was out of his chair in an instant. His car pulled onto the shoulder with its lights on. Austin saw it first. He stepped back halfway along the car. Ryan got out of the car. He walked straight past Austin. Didn't stop. No questions. He looked into the back seat. Julian was still sitting in there. His wrists were pressed against the seat back. Ryan opened the door. He asked, "Did you call to verify?" Austin was quiet for a few seconds. The leather badge wallet was still in his hand. Ryan leaned into the car, unlocked the cuffs. Julian stepped out. He straightened his sleeves. He smoothed the lapels of his vest. A faint line remained on his wrist. Wind from the traffic whipped the edge of his jacket against his hip. Austin started talking about the badge, about how the story sounded too neat. Ryan cut him off. He asked the same question as before. Had the verification call been made? Austin said no. Ryan pulled out his phone. He called Julian's office on speakerphone. The front desk answered almost immediately. Ryan asked to confirm his name and title. The person on the other end read the correct name. Julian Parker. Read the correct title. Head of the Atlanta office. Read the correct number of years of service. Read the correct office address. Just a short distance away. Ryan then pulled up the leadership page on his phone. The photo on the screen matched the man standing next to the patrol car. Olivia was still filming. Austin's chest cam was still running. The call took less than a minute. Julian got his leather badge wallet back. Got his official ID back. Got his phone back. He turned on the screen. New messages filled the top of the display. The team out there continued to tail the suspect's car. The child was later brought back safely. But over half an hour of dispatching went by, and he wasn't on the next call. Julian called Megan back. He asked for the car's new location. Asked what unit was running the block. Then he stepped over to the shoulder. Out of the strong wind, Ryan stayed back with Austin. He didn't say much, just pointed toward the hood of the patrol car. Austin placed them on it, one by one. The badge, access card, lanyard, the patrol car keys, his handheld radio. Ryan picked up the radio. He radioed dispatch to change the status code. That patrol car was taken out of service. Right there on the spot. Austin stood by the hood, empty-handed. Olivia changed her camera angle. She got that on camera. 2. Another car was called in to take possession of the vehicle and the log. Austin wouldn't be touching the file for that traffic stop anymore. Before noon, his body cam footage was flagged and secured. Megan's call log was pulled into the same file. Olivia's video was sent to the internal affairs address. The official leadership page from the federal office was printed out and included. The timestamp on the patrol car's dash matched the delay in the dispatch call from the field. From that point on, the direction of the case file changed. It was no longer about using a phone while driving. The focus shifted to something else. Real identification had been presented. A real contact had been provided. A real call could have been made right on the spot. But that step was skipped before the handcuffs clicked shut. That same day, Austin's name was taken off the patrol schedule for the next shift. His login for the reporting system didn't work anymore. His key card for the equipment room and camera storage had its status changed before the end of the day. By the start of the next week, his personal locker in the locker room wasn't his anymore. A few days later, his law enforcement certification was no longer listed as active. Then the federal case file opened up a separate investigation. The data was filed in order. The camera footage, dispatch logs, bystander, video, confirmation from the federal office, the detention timeline. After that, Austin's name was no longer on the active duty roster. His personnel file was closed faster than the time he spent wearing a badge. A federal custody record was later opened in his name. The civil side was also closed with a large settlement. But the thing that lasted longer than the money was the new procedure. From then on, the police department had to add one very short line to its training. If you encounter valid federal credentials and still intend to detain the individual, you must call for verification first. The contact list for working with federal agencies was also redrawn. That morning's camera footage didn't just sit in an evidence locker. It made its way into training for new recruits. It made its way into procedural review sessions. It made its way into the same meeting rooms that used to treat that verification call as an afterthought. Julian Parker's name was still on his office door. Same as always. His service wallet was still in his inside coat pocket. Same as always. Only one more thing went with it from that day on. A small piece of paper with a pre-written verification contact. In your opinion, at the moment Ryan walked up to that car door, what was the one detail that turned this case around the fastest? For me, the heaviest part wasn't when the cuffs clicked shut. It was knowing the right phone call would have taken less than a minute. But the man on the scene still chose to make it his last resort. If you think this kind of procedural failure deserves a closer look, share the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to Power Misplaced Stories.